Hey, welcome everybody to ITIS 6200/8200. This is going to be cloud security. So we're coming to the end of our class. Probably going to be able to do maybe two more modules. We'll do cloud security and then physical security. We've hit at a very high level as much as we possibly can squeeze into this class. Unfortunately, we weren't able to hit a lot of the hands-on activities given the amount of conflict, scheduling conflicts, etc. But we're going to go ahead and ride this out to the end. So we're going to cover cloud security and then physical security the next week. I will get to everyone some sort of review sheet to kind of let you know what we're going to be covering, but it should be pretty self-explanatory. I will also be posting all the PowerPoint presentations, and you should be able to get all the videos, watch them again and again, and as long as you cover everything in the slides as well as the videos, you should do fine on the final. Uh, so let's go ahead and jump right into cloud security, and yeah. So basically, let's talk about what is the cloud. So this is always the question: what is the cloud? Where is the cloud? Are we in the cloud now? These are always questions that I'm sure everybody has heard or even asked yourself. And the term cloud computing is everywhere these days. You see it on television, you hear it on radio. I mean, it's everywhere. But in simplest terms, cloud computing really just means storing and being able to access data and programs over the internet instead of doing it locally. So, I mean, essentially, the stripped down version of it, that's what it is. So, the cloud is just a metaphor for a service or storage where the exact mechanics aren't required to be known, or even really matter at that point. It's all about the functionality that's being provided is the really important part of that. So the cloud is typically it's different from a network. Attached storage device. Something like a server, or it's very very different. Um, so, like storing content on a home storage device, or if you're at work, a corporate storage device, it's not the same as utilizing the cloud. So the cloud is it's very different and than other storage methods that we've used over the past few decades. It really delivers a new way. To provide services and storage and development. So it's very versatile. And the cloud's it's not as simple as some corporations would have you to believe. Uh, you know, some can't. I won't name who, but some companies are name their my cloud, and just to make things a little more confusing. Um, so let's really cloud computing is a new term, but it's not really a new concept. It's actually this particular technology has matured from what it kind of used to be. So it's no matter what you call it, the cloud is a way of moving services, infrastructure, and platforms into a new environment, basically. And ideally, the move makes the growth and management of software and other technology a lot easier and more cost effective for a lot of corporations. Um, and over the past 3 decades, with a lot of different ideas and developments, kind of coming together to kind of make the cloud, kind of what we understand it today. It really did initially look like a way of kind of pooling all the resources and providing storage, and it's become so much more over the past couple of years. So we're going to start off, kind of looking at, what is the cloud, and then we're going to start talking about, different types of services, and then, look at threats and, some of the controls that we have in place for cloud, and sort of and move from there. So right off the bat, the cloud it's an on-demand self-server service. So users that use cloud services, they kind of have that capability to kind of tweak and customize and kind of configure services as needed to kind of meet their needs, both right now and as they progress and as they grow. Um, so that's definitely a benefit. As far as you know, broad network access. Resources can be, accessed from any device, anywhere, with any connection, and the cloud really is designed to be accessed from anywhere. So that's another feature. We were talking about resource pooling. Kind of putting computing resources are kind of pulled together, kind of serve multiple consumers, using kind of a multi-tenant model with different physical and virtual resources, assigned and reassigned according to the consumer demand. So that's one of the other features of kind of pooling all the different resources. Um, Rapid elasticity. So this is basically, the capabilities within the cloud. They kind of have that ability to kind of be expanded and adjust to kind of add more performance or space or capability, to whatever systems are being used. Allowing users to kind of grow as they need to without having to worry about the process. Um, and to a lot of users, because of this elasticity, it almost seems to them that they have unlimited resources. So that's another, great feature of the cloud. Um, cloud systems, they automatically, control and optimize, resources, by kind of leveraging it and metering the capability. You're trying to get this measured service. And so the resource usage can really be controlled and reported, and it kind of provides that kind of transparency for the provider and the consumer. So these are just a couple of the features that kind of go alongside with the cloud. Um, and if you were really to ask a group of IT people and executives what the cloud is, their definition would probably include, a whole lot more of, flowery language and descriptions and what they use it for. And, most definitions, the points kind of listed here on the slide, they tend to describe the kind of the bulk of cloud deployments. There are some minor differences here and there, but this particular slide really kind of points out the features of the cloud and what it does at a very basic level. Um, and the kind of common areas where people have really encountered cloud technologies are things like email and the use of services like Google Docs, and that kind of allow that collaboration with multiple people on the internet all at the same time. And I'm sure most of everybody's used Google Docs at some point or another. And the thing is that the average Joe doesn't need to have a dedicated desktop mail client to store all their email and attachments, and they can store everything in the cloud and use a web browser for access. I mean, it's pretty sufficient for what your average person needs. Um, these days, you have a lot of Office suites like Google Apps and Office 365. They kind of entered in the cloud service world, and they are used by tons of different people and businesses. And there's also services like Dropbox, OneDrive. They're very popular as far as like storage is concerned, and they're good for regular consumers and businesses and corporations. So the thing is, Microsoft and other companies that they're kind of experimenting with putting different programs and stuff out into the cloud. They're doing this to kind of make it more affordable, more accessible, to kind of internet users, and these types of technology stuff like Exchange, even Active Directory, SharePoint, and stuff like that. They're kind of experimenting with putting this stuff out there and seeing if they can make it more universal. Um, but the thing is, with the kind of the support of cloud technologies, both with service providers and consumers. Um, there's no doubt that they're going to be around for a long time, because everybody's trying to find more resources. People are going to keep trying to use services offered by the cloud, and businesses are going to try to find a way to move the cost and responsibility to somebody else, to kind of simplify their responsibility and keep costs at a low. So this is definitely a benefit when it comes to the cloud services. So we've kind of talked about what the cloud is. Let's talk about some of the types of cloud solutions. Um, the thing is, calling the cloud, it's not really accurate because it really doesn't fully describe the kind of the scope of the services. Even though the cloud services, they kind of share the ability to provide resources, software, information to kind of reduce the information technology costs. They can also provide the kind of ability to kind of combine services in a lot of different ways and kind of scale up almost unlimited amount of services to kind of increase raw computing, or without the regular user having to invest in more equipment and to kind of support the setup there. Everything's out there. They don't have to pay for that additional stuff. So kind of the first point to kind of consider when we're kind of talking about the cloud, is kind of what form is the cloud going to take? Is it going to be public? Is it going to be private? Is there going to kind of be a hybrid, or is it going to kind of be a community? As far as the solution for your company. So you can see there in the slides, the public cloud. It's also called the external cloud, and it's kind of hosted by a third party. It kind of has their own personnel and resources located at their office, their own kind of off-site facility, and customers can kind of add or remove space and services on demand, and only pay for those services that they use and how much of them they actually need. So that's kind of the good thing about the public cloud. The problem from a security standpoint with public clouds is that they're owned by another party, by a third party. So any kind of data that's placed on those public cloud systems, although that company owns it, it's controlled by a third party, somebody else. So if the idea of kind of a third party having control of your information is like scary, and it's a risk, this is definitely not the solution for your company or you as an individual. So then you have the private cloud, and in this type of setup, it's kind of built from the ground up by one company, kind of for their internal use. So while this kind of offers all the benefits of the cloud itself, it also offers the organization like control of their information, because everything's on site there and it's their own infrastructure. So that's kind of the benefit of the cloud. Then you kind of have like a hybrid, um, and this is very useful. It kind of combines the public and the private, and so the company might store kind of its sensitive information on the private side of things, and kind of while scaling some additional space and capability with the public cloud. So that's kind of how the hybrid works. Um, then you have the community there, and it's shared by several different parties, um, but at the same time, each individual party, they can kind of share common goals, security needs, and resources, and this can really make things easier for management purposes, uh, and that have kind of similar requirements. All right, so uh, in addition, although a lot of these models, they really offer some benefits, there are some potential problems, some security problems. One potential concern is that is the time data can take to kind of travel from a remote site kind of compared to the time it takes when when everything is stored locally, on your internal network. So this is called data latency, and it can cause problems for if you have some time sensitive operations. So this is definitely a problem when storing everything like that on cloud solutions. You know when we're kind of looking at the cloud question in terms of security, the private cloud tends to win over all these. It's there is a trade-off in that the private cloud requires more money, as far as hardware support and and additional stuff. uh, but on the other hand, you going with a kind of a public cloud, it does reduce the cost and the expenses, but the security needs to be really evaluated and monitored much more closely when it comes to that. So there's trade-offs when it comes to the types of cloud solutions that you as an individual or company um, really try to select. So let's look at some of the forms of cloud services out there. So we've talked about what the cloud is, the kind of types of cloud solutions. Now let's look at the forms of cloud services that are kind of offered today. So the first one there is software as a service, and as you can read there, it's the fastest growing and largest part of the cloud services market today, and is expected to continue its rapid growth. So this type of cloud service, it's really become so popular so quickly because so many companies are looking for software as a service to kind of supplement their applications and the services. So the idea of kind of being able to offload the management of the software to somebody else, and but still be able to kind of leverage all the different features of the software. I mean, it's very attractive. For an example, so a company that kind of chooses to go with a product like Office 365, from Microsoft, they can integrate that, with a wide range of like cloud-based services as well. They're easily able to update and share documents. Another good example is Google's Gmail service. That's I've worked for a couple of companies now that have leveraged that service, and this kind of puts the setup and management, the mail servers in the cloud, and it kind of lets users access their email from anywhere. It doesn't have to be specifically from the internal network. Um, so software as a service, it really eliminates uh, a lot of the need to kind of install, run applications on individual computers, and in many cases, only a browser is really required. And so this kind of ease of use is very attractive to corporations, kind of looking to reduce the support burdens and costs. So it's definitely a good looking solution to your internal environment. Then you have what's called the platform as a service. So this is another type of a service, and as you can see there, it's targeted mostly towards the development process. So software developers can kind of use the platform as a service as kind of like a framework where they can develop applications. So platform as a service, it really makes the development, testing, and deployment of applications. It's simple and it's cost effective. So with this kind of technology, like enterprise operations especially, or even third-party providers, they can kind of manage their operating systems, the virtualization, servers, storage, networking, and the platform as a service software itself, while developers are manage the applications. So that's another form of cloud service. Um, the next one, is infrastructure as a service. So this is, this is self-service models for accessing, monitoring, and managing remote data center infrastructures, such as computing, storage, networking, and networking devices. And an example of that would be like, firewalls or something like that. So this is definitely, has its advantages. So, for something to kind of be considered cloud computing, you need to be able to access your data on your programs over the internet, or at the very least have the data synchronized with other information over the web. So in kind of a large environment, you may know all there is to know about what's on the other side of the connection. Um, as an individual user, you may never have any idea of what kind of massive data processing is happening on the other side. So, like I said, there's a lot to cloud computing. So let's talk about some of the threats. I mean, what are some of the things that we face? We've talked about what it is and in different types and some of the forms. So what's the risk here? What's the threat to cloud security? What do we need to be concerned about as part of the IT team, or if you're even part of management trying to decide, if cloud security is best for you. So, um, cloud it doesn't mean fewer problems relating to security. And just because you have the cloud doesn't mean that the burden's completely taken off you. Many of the same problems from traditionally hosted environments exist in the cloud. Cloud security, it should be treated very seriously, as seriously as it would be in any other situation where you have like a mission critical services, you have important data, you have, business processes that you depend on to keep things going. So in order to kind of understand the types of threats that exist in the cloud and how they can kind of affect your environment, um, we're going to kind of go over a list of security issues that are universally recognized as being like the biggest. But not these are not the only issues kind of facing the cloud and cloud environments. This is just a handful. Um, as many of you know, if you watch the news or you keep track of lots of different podcasts, everything, a single breach resulting in a loss of a single record is bad. And a breach that results in like a lot of records is worse. But if you have like a massive loss of records, it's catastrophic. Um, if many of you know, in 2013, Target lost like, I think it was 110 million credit cards and personal information to a group of hackers. So, when they stole that information, it proved like really expensive to Target's image and their bottom line. I believe it was 2015. Um, the Office of Personal Management in the United States lost 22 million records in a single data breach. So there, I think, kind of along with that, there was like 2 million records that included like biometric data on individuals. So both these breaches were like horrendous, and the result was like legal action and tons of other problems. So data breaches on the scale of Target or the Office of Personal Management, are more than possible in the cloud. And so you need to be aware of and kind of manage the weaknesses that kind of lead to this type of loss. Use encryption for storage and transmission. Deploy virtual machines to kind of isolate operations and processes in the cloud. Um, in some environments, the potential for to lose something is so great that private cloud should be used instead of the regular commercial solutions or public. That's definitely something to reevaluate. Data loss is so big, and it's got to be addressed by people that choose to use the cloud or any technology that stores data. So kind of unlike a data breach, data loss is kind of the process of losing data through an accident. So, for example, like the loss of data due to kind of the lack of a backup would be a data loss. So, like large scale data loss, it's possible. I'm telling you, I've seen it happen. But a small scale loss is much more likely to occur. If somebody accidentally does something. So that's definitely something um, to keep your mind on. Account and service traffic hijacking. So this is another concern when it comes to cloud applications and services. So just kind of as it is with traditional applications. So kind of taking advantage of software flaws, buffer overflows, poor passwords, weak encryption. An attacker can kind of gain control of an account, and even use stuff like phishing, so like social engineering, sniffing, man-in-the-middle attacks to kind of compromise a system. So um, anything from altered transactions, manipulated data, um, crashing an application, and yeah, these are just some of the possible outcomes of this type of situation. A lot of this stuff, we talked about in web apps. Um, so this is no less of a problem. It's a very real issue of an account being compromised by an attacker, by eavesdropping or using something else to kind of intercept credentials. So once an attacker has those credentials in their possession, the attacker can do different stuff like including planning software and um, changing configurations, or even using like a system to kind of pivot to kind of dig deeper into the application or environment. So depending on the situation, it is very possible for an intruder to get access to a high level account and have near limitless access to your environment. Um, Another thing is insecure APIs. They've caused numerous problems. The kind of the same APIs they put in place kind of allow third party developers to plug in their applications and cloud services. They can also be used to allow an attacker to kind of dig deeper into a system. Denial of service, that's another big one. It's just as possible with cloud-based applications as it is with traditional systems. So, cloud services, maybe less vulnerable in some cases. They're still vulnerable and could be taken down by an attacker. Um, One problem that really occurs with the cloud that doesn't appear in a lot of other places is the potential for different types of financial impact. With cloud services, a customer, they may get billed for like extra resources being consumed in the form of traffic. In some cases, kind of the increased expense may cause a business to shut down rather than pay a huge bill associated with an attack. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. Um, Malicious insiders, they've been the focus of tons of different conversations regarding the cloud. Since you're no longer hosting your solution on site, you have to trust that the provider of the service is has properly vetted and is monitoring their employees. A single person on the inside could easily cause problems in the form of lost data, stolen data. This could impact the operation of your business, but it can also impact when the data ends up in the wrong hands. So this is definitely a typical threat to cloud security. Um, Another one is just kind of throw out there. When it comes to the malicious, and is lack of due diligence. From the service providers and those malicious insiders. And it can be very damaging to your customers. So kind of a lack of monitoring or policy or employee screening or maintenance, and this can be catastrophic. Unpatched software. I come across this all the time where people have their servers in the cloud and we'll do an external penetration test on them, and there's all this vulnerable software out there that they have exploits that are available that we take advantage of. Um, Another big threat is the multi-tenancy environment. It's very common to set up, especially in the public cloud. Um, so you kind of have this multi-tenant environment. There's definitely an increased potential for a data breach or a compromise. So with resources shared among different multi people, a lot of different people within the cloud, there can be a situation where another customer is kind of privy to your data through malicious means or even accidentally. And I'll tell you, one of the big ones here is if what you're trying to save money on hosting a server and you're doing it through a third party or something like that, and that third party has set up multiple customers on the same server. So think about it like this. So you have one server, and maybe one customer is taking advantage of the web applications while another uh, customer is taking advantage of of some sort of file transfer um, application on that particular server. So think of it like this. Think of it like one customer has their website there. Now they have nothing to do with file transfers. That's not part of their services, but the other company does. So an attacker wants to attack the company that has the website. Well, they find out this other company, they allow port 21, which is FTP, on that website open. Well, they attack that company first in order to affect the other company. So you can kind of see how this can be a potential problem. Um, so kind of remember that unless you're in an environment that you completely own, like a private cloud, you are in a shared environment. So any shared environment, a lapse in security could lead to an exposure, and this can take care. You really have to take care to kind of end-to-end protection exist. If this is something that you really want to be able to be sharing those resources out there with somebody else. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And the threats that we're kind of looking at here are just some brief ones. This just happen to be some of the big ones. A lot of these threats that exist in the cloud are the same or nearly as the same as like a traditional non-cloud environment. You know, However, that doesn't mean that everything is the same across the board. And so just keep that in mind. And we've kind of gone through several different things at this point. You should have a pretty good idea of how some of that works. So let's talk about some of the we've talked about some of the risks. What the cloud is, the types, the forms, the threats. As far as the risk is concerned, let's talk about some types of attacks on cloud computing. So the first one there is what's called a cross-site request forgery. I believe we just briefly touched on this in web applications, but this is a type of attack that can be potentially brought to kind of any environment that have a web application present. So let's think about this type of attack for a minute. Okay, so a CSRF, or a cross-site request forgery, it's a type of attack. It's designed to kind of entice someone into submitting a request to a web application. Um, so so let's think of it like this. So since the request is kind of inadvertently submitted by someone, the request kind of runs with the privileges and context of whoever is submitting it, meaning that depending on what access they have, the request could cause serious harm. Depending on if it's an administrator, it's going to absolutely cause harm, but if somebody with very low privileges, it's not. So kind of making this attack even more effective is that most of the applications that accept this type of attack, they kind of keep track of that information about the client, like who is this person, what rights do they have, and kind of armed with this information and not knowing that the user was enticed into executing this type of request, the application will have no way to determine if the request is malicious. It will kind of assume it's a legitimate user, since it appears to originate from the same place. So what harm could this attack really accomplish? Typically, an attacker will kind of attempt to alter information on the server, so it kind of makes it easier to kind of compromise or come back later. So attackers would not benefit from using the CSRF to retrieve information, because the request is executed by the victim, and the responses would return to them. Kind of another variation or a more advanced version of this attack is what's called a stored CSRF. And so this type of attack is like a forged request is stored on the server. Attacker can kind of store the request on a site by finding a site that accepts HTML input and submitting a request as an image tag or other tag, and in some cases even as a form of a kind of a stored cross-site scripting attack. So don't really worry too much about the CSRF. I know I went over it a little bit, but I'm not going to be asking you a lot of questions in regards to the CSRF attacks. Um, so then you have something what's called a side channel attack. So this kind of attack is kind of unique to the cloud. Now I may ask you about this one because it is unique, but it's potentially very devastating. It really requires a lot of skill and almost a little bit of a measure of luck. So this is a form of attack that it kind of attempts to breach the confidentiality of a victim, kind of indirectly by exploiting the fact that they're using a shared resource on the cloud. So think of it like this. So kind of in order to kind of execute this attack, the attacker's got to have a few things in place. So a virtual machine is placed on the same physical location as the victim. So by definition, this is very tough to do because the cloud is designed to hide the details of the kind of the physical side of things from the customer. However, if you use tools like traceroute, DNS queries, I mean, it's very possible to kind of locate a target system with about 50% accuracy. So once that VM is in place on the same server as the VMs of the victim, the attacking party, they can start commencing their attacks. So the attacker can kind of exploit the fact that they and their target are on the same server, sharing resources, including memory, processor, cache, and even the network. So in this situation, the attacker can kind of use scripts and applications to determine if sensitive information is somewhere within reach, of kind of being intercepted. So fortunately, side channel attacks are very difficult to execute and have very few cases of actually being successful in the wild. But think this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. These side channel attacks are unique to the cloud, so keep that in mind as we're kind of moving through these. Then you have stuff like signature wrapping attacks. This is not exclusive to the cloud, but it is dangerous as far as compromising the security of a web application. Basically, the signature wrapping attack, it kind of relies on the exploitation of a technique used in web services. If any of you've ever heard of SOAP, it's kind of used by web services, the request and response. They can be signed using an XML signature, and again, we're not going to dig into this too deep. I do want you to remember the side channel attacks. If you do want to look up some additional information on the signature wrapping attacks, feel free. It really digs deep down into the weeds, but we're really not going to cover too much of that. And there's obviously other types of attacks that we've talked about in web applications. We talked about service and session hijacking. There's also like DNS attacks. SQL injection attacks, we talked a little bit about that. The denial of service attacks, those types of things. So what do we do? How do we, what are the controls that we need in place for these types of attacks? Obviously, there's tons of them. There's the security design and architecture. So these are huge keys, as far as success. Firewalls, virtual machines, storage encryption, intrusion detection system, policies. There's all kinds of different tools that can be deployed. The biggest consideration to kind of ensuring that security works at the kind of optimum level is through design. Specifically, kind of addressing security at the beginning of the process rather than later on. While you're trying to set up your cloud environment, let's go ahead and handle security. Identity and access management. These are critical for any kind of secure application, just as much as for cloud applications. So a really comprehensive solution. Authentication, authorization, and access control, and this comes with is essential in the protection of critical resources. Governance is not always clearly understood aspect of technology. in the context of cloud governance, it's the policies, procedures, and standards, and and other kind of related items are kind of deployed and enforced to ensure proper functioning. So just think of policies, procedures, and standards as far as governance. Risk management. Vulnerability assessments, they kind of go along with it. And organizations kind of looking to kind of place their information and services or applications in the cloud, and they need to ensure that they closely examine and assess the level of risk. They're kind of taken on putting their stuff out there. So what's called personal identifiable information, or it's very important that they keep track of that risk. Compliance, kind of, it's got to be observed and adhered to, because it represents your legal responsibilities. As far as compliance is concerned, based on the industry. Being out of compliance is a big problem. You could face fines and civil actions and penalizations for fail to kind of meet that compliance. And then you kind of have the availability. That comes into the consideration. As far as usability, uptime. Most companies just kind of look for the number of, you know, making sure their service level agreements with their, provided by their ISPs. But they kind of fail to consider what happens when there's a loss of access, there's an outage, there's a permanent loss of data, there's a natural disaster, denial of service. What happens? What's the business continuity in disaster recovery when availability fails? So there has to be controls in place. As far as that's concerned. So as far as cloud computing, it's everywhere, and the technology is deployed everywhere from the home market to the business place, because it's such a common technology, and it can and it will be integrated into environments that you're going to face from day to day. So that you got to know how the cloud is positioned. In really simple terms, cloud computing means storing and accessing data and programs over the internet instead of your computer's hard drive. Let's think of it that way. The cloud, it's just a metaphor for a service or a storage, where the exact underlying mechanics aren't required to kind of be known, or just don't matter. Rather than functionality, provided the functionality provided, it's an important part of the equation. So, just keep all those things in mind when it comes to cloud security. Now, I realize this is a very high level of cloud security, and we just kind of covered a couple of things, but this is the extent of what we'll be covering in this class. All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much, and we will see you next week.